Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And my guest today is a designer, a developer, a member of the team at Funco, and is the person behind the new upcoming game, Wicked and Wise, being published by Weird Giraffe Games. Welcome to the show, Fertessa Alysse.
Thank you for having me on. Nice to meet you.
That was a wind-up. That was a mouthful there. Do you feel like you're ready for the Weird Giraffe treatment?
Well, I hope so. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to it. I don't know what I should expect.
I'm really interested in you being part of the Funco Games team, which I know is like an evolution or a rebranding of Prospero Hall, and that's like a whole thing in and of itself, but you're also an independent game designer, a freelancer who can pitch games to other companies. And that seems like that may be a unique thing to our hobby because, you know, like writers who are under contract with one publishing company, you know, they might not be able to publish something elsewhere, or patents that are developed within, you know, a technology company might not be able to be sold to other companies. So, like, what is your relationship, I guess, to Funco, and you know, how much leeway do you have in order to pitch games to other companies?
So actually, while I'm at Funco, I can't pitch games to other companies, but because I signed my games before I got there, then those are all in the clear to continue down their paths of getting published. So they're not that unique in that respect. But yeah, they're still very supportive of, you know, my hobby endeavors whenever I was an independent designer. And so those designs are still getting the chance to get their wings and you know, get published.
That's awesome. And that's great that they're supportive. So when did you start with Funco?
I started with Funco, it has almost been a year, but the end of last September.
Like many people, I'm hoping like many people, I first saw the name Prospero Hall and thought that was just like some cool hipster board game designer's name, and assumed that that was a person until a little bit later, in which I learned that Prospero Hall was a team. What's the like nutshell evolution there that you can explain so, you know, ignorant people like myself are a little bit more informed?
So Prospero Hall is definitely a team, and you are not alone, because I initially also thought it was just a really cool pseudo name like Cher. But actually they were doing so well with creating these like quality games that Funco came and you know, want to strike up an agreement to kind of absorb them within the company. So we became Funco Games. And actually, whenever we release games, some of them will still say Prospero Hall on them, the more hobby end games. But you'll also see that nice Funco Games on it. So that's kind of the short of it, as far as I know.
I think a lot of people would be celebratory, but also a little bit worried that this would kind of make all of the games that would be coming out of this now kind of legendary. Well, maybe not legendary. This very well-respected game design studio would suddenly all have these cute chibi figures and aesthetic going for it. But Funco Games is more than just a Funco aesthetic factory, right? You know, it extends beyond that, and there's all sorts of themes and games that you guys are working on. Like, what are some examples of like the exciting stuff that you guys are working on or publishing right now?
So most recently we put out Fast and Furious and Goonies, and those are doing really well. So Goonies was a cooperative kind of not RPG, but it's a cooperative adventure where you have a GM, and That one has different kind of adventures that you work through. We also have Fast and Furious, which is also cooperative. We have Haunted Mansion, which is a favorite of mine. And that's from someone who hasn't actually ridden on the Haunted Mansion ride. But that one's a very cool set collection game. And yeah, those have been coming out. We're going to have a new batch coming out soon. Can't talk about them yet. But yeah, you expect games with only the Funko Pops, due to being under the umbrella. And while we do have some Funko Pop games, I should asterisk that because you think they would be very cutesy games, but actually they are introduction into war games. They are like
Yeah.
war games with the Funko Pops. So even with the Funko Pops, we're very purposeful and thoughtful when it comes to the design, and when it comes to games with IPs, we're very intentional about how we inject the theme and make sure that it feels natural, and that it really brings it alive for people who are fans of the property, and still has that nice gaminess to it for people who may not be familiar with the property. Like with Haunted Mansion, I still love it even without that attachment.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really cool thing about the Funko Pop like combat tactical game that's out there. I remember playing that at PAX Unplugged 2019 in the before times, and I was really amazed because I was expecting one thing, just like you were saying, and then I was like, this is a tactical combat game. Like, I'm looking for cover, and Harley Quinn is shooting, this thing and laying traps here, and I got all the grid-based thing and movement points and the whole shebang. I was really impressed. And what I think is really interesting about that is it's a good enough game that you could not care about the license in any way whatsoever. And suddenly you're like, I don't care who Iron Fist is or who, like Appa. I don't know. I'm just pulling things out of the air right now. But, licensed characters, you might have no familiarity with the property whatsoever, but because of their role within the game, you might then go, oh, I got to play this. And that's one of the beautiful things about it. But we are not just here to talk about Funko. We're here to talk about you, Fertessa, the designer. I gotta know, what's your history with tabletop games? Like, what got you into designing in the first place?
So, two separate things. I was always into games as a kid, but not the hobby side of it. I only knew Risk, Monopoly, things like that your parents would just like buy and bring home.
Hand off to you and your siblings and say, occupy yourselves so you don't bother me.
Yep. Except there were no siblings for me, so it was just me versus me. And I still deeply enjoyed it, and I was socially awkward growing up, and I dare say still socially awkward, if my intro didn't let you know. But the thing that I enjoyed was I could relate to people through games, and I could kind of ignore that barrier and just go straight into the fun part with somebody else. And I learned that with my parents, and then it transferred to other people. So that love for games stuck with me as an adult. And later, 4 years ago, I I didn't start the game night, but friends of mine started a game night, and it's just the three of us, and we would play every month. And one of those friends, she said that she wanted to make a board game. And until that point, I thought board games were just, born together when two stores loved each other. And they just appeared on the shelf.
I love it.
So once that idea got in my head, I'm the type of person that when a what if comes in my head, I kind of follow it through. And I was like, what would a board game look like if I made one? What would I even make it about? And I just kept following that until I started making my own board game. Like literally, I had a desk job in a corporation, and during my lunch hour, I went down to the CVS, bought construction paper, and cut out my first prototype. And just doing that made me so happy, and I kept snowballing it. I played it with my two friends when we had our little meetup, and then I started researching because I was just like, I only know roll and move, so it looked a lot like Monopoly. And it kept evolving because I was listening to podcasts, and I was going on to BGG to see what things were. What are game mechanics? Okay, what is a euro? What is American trash? Is that actually a term, or is that an unofficial term? What does that mean?
Is that an insult or is that an affectionate term?
And I was reading essays, or like, these are the German school of game design principles.
Mm-hmm.
And just really threw myself into game design while designing my first game. And actually, it was Book of Villainy, which was on Kickstarter in June. But through trying to learn about game design, I was implementing everything that I learned
Mm-hmm.
into that first game. And also, that was whenever I started being introduced to the hobby. So it was actually, the game design came first, and then I delved into the hobby to figure out how to make things work. Like, how do I make things move? What is a mechanic? Like, what are these different mechanics? And how do I make this different from Monopoly? The burning question. Um,
Yeah, yeah, of course. Well, it's such an amazing time when someone is first getting introduced to the tabletop gaming hobby, especially if you grew up with those traditional games and you're not as familiar with the modern stuff. Like even me, I played Hero Quest. I grew up with the traditional games. I played a lot of Magic the Gathering, that kind of stuff. But I had no real concept of the sheer quantity of like real good, solid, interesting games that were coming out. And my moment of awakening was probably 12 years ago at this point, when I started going like Catan and Small World and Carcassonne. And at that point I was like, well, these must be the three greatest games of all time, and there's nothing else. These are the three games that have surpassed the traditional image of what a tabletop game should be. And then you start having these ideas about, well, I could do something that's a little bit different than this, or combines all the elements of this. And then you realize, oh, thousands of people have gone through this process, but you stuck with it. You actually like cultivated these skills and developed these skills and did the research. And that's such a wonderful story that within 4 years, now you're getting games published and you are like a full-time game person. If this fateful moment didn't happen for you, what would your career trajectory be? Like what were you aspiring to be before board games walked into your life?
Well, I would say that my goal before I got started board games was actually to do visual effects in film and TV. And yeah, I was hard on that path. That's what I went to school for. I did 4 years for a digital media degree, and then 1 year for animation and visual effects.
Oh,
And
cool.
so visual effects was where I kind of landed, because I felt like it was something that was fun. But honestly, comparing to how I feel whenever I design games, nothing has fulfilled me to the point that I don't feel like anything is missing, like designing board games. Like, it requires me to draw on all of my previous degrees, all of my creativity, and it just allows me to do so many different things that like individual jobs in my past allowed me to do on a smaller level. But I don't know. I'd probably be floating around to the next random thing, to just kind of challenge myself until I found my way to something like this. So,
How was it explaining it to your parents? I mean, like you said, you were playing the games by yourself, and
mhm.
then at a certain point, you're like, "Hey, mom and dad, or whoever raised you, family is a different thing." I work in social services, so like family is a malleable concept. But
Mhm.
talking to your loved ones and saying, hey, I know I have this desk job that's like a good steady job and everything, but I'm going to become a game designer. How did that register with them?
I mean, so I'm a bit of a oddball. I'm a little weirdo. And so I've always hit my parents with the random things, but also I've always been very creative. So I was painting when I was younger, writing books of poetry, I wrote an entire book. So like, this was just another creative project
Hmm.
that they saw, and it was really just a thing that I was doing, and I think they didn't really register as anything different until I had gone down this path of like, hey, I'm actually going to these conventions. These are taking me out of my comfort zone. Like I'm traveling because of this game, and people are talking to me because of this game. I'm talking to people because of it. These are all very opposite from my introverted behavior. And so, they took that as positive. And once I got it signed, they were just really proud. They're very proud of it. And, just, oh, my daughter made a board game. I told my coworker, I don't play games anymore, but yes. And
Yeah,
been very supportive about it.
that's awesome. Right now, you are building up to the Kickstarter for Wicked and Wise, like we were talking about.
Hmm.
And I mentioned at the beginning, getting the weird giraffe treatment. I've known Carla Kopp for a few years now, and she never ceases to amaze me with the ever expanding cult of personality that is Carla. She's a font of creativity. She empowers a lot of people. She's a great resource for a lot of reasons. And I always feel like she has dozens of companies running concurrently. I don't know what's going on with Carla. Uh, but I always like finding out to what limited degree I can conceptualize everything going on there. How did you get wrapped up with Carla? Was she just a publisher that you made a pitch to, or did you work with her in some capacity?
So Carla was actually my very first, I want to say, convention friend, because I started out in Atlanta, and it's a very small kind of gaming sphere there. So I would go to these gaming conventions, and I would be kind of out of place because, again, I was introverted. It was kind of a lot to take in. And Carla was that person that would be like, hey, you want to go step outside for a second? We just take a chill. So she was really that first person. And even before that, I had admired her because she was the first female designer that came to my attention. Because when I started listening to podcasts, she was on a couple of them.
Hmm.
Um, so it was really cool to meet her, and we met at Proto ATL the first time, and it wasn't a capacity where I was trying to I wanted to play test my first game, Book of Villainy, with her. That was the most nervous I'd ever been. Carla is the nicest person
Yeah.
you could ever like sit down and play a game with, but like it was my first time sitting down with a publisher, and I was just like, oh my god. um but she was great. And after that, we ran into each other at Dice Tower in Orlando, and I think another convention, and then online. So we ended up making more of a connection on a friendship level, and that was how I got to know her. Really, it was just like we were both at conventions in the South, and that's a smaller circle, I think. So that was the initial contact, and then as far as with Wicked and Wise, because we were friends, I was actually over at her house to do like a game jam sort of a thing. And I
Right.
had brought my prototype for Wicked and Wise, and it was the first time it had ever been played by anyone other than myself. And I was like, guys, I'm sorry. I already know this is going to be trash, but just can we just break it and see if there's a game there afterwards? And I hadn't even written down the rules, and I was so nervous that I didn't realize that I hadn't written the rules. But she and Nick played, and we had one other designer, but her name is slipping my brain. But we played it, and at the end they were just like, no, there's definitely a game here. This is really cool. So that was that connection.
What was the original intent behind Wicked and Wise? Like when you were sitting down with this game, were you thinking about it thematically? Was
Hmm.
there like a mechanical concept that you were really trying to get across?
Hmm.
Was the game built around like one core like killer feature, if that makes sense, or
Hmm.
was it like more cohesive when it came together?
So it was another what if scenario, because I found in all of my game playing that I am not a fan of cooperative games.
No,
Um,
you're like the first person I've talked to who's like, I am not a fan. I've heard people be like, I could take it or leave it, but not a fan.
Not a fan. But there are still good ones that I will play out there. Just I found that in general, I'm not a fan of cooperative games.
I have to ask, what is it about the cooperative game? Sorry to interrupt, but
Oh
I
no.
have to know because, like, again, if anything, this podcast is about like the creative experiences that drive the people who make games. I'm less interested in like describe to me every single mechanic and
Mhm.
like give me the full preview of a game before it actually comes out. I don't
Yeah.
need the full rules or anything, but I care a lot about like what are the things that concern the
Mhm.
people who make games. And so I am fascinated by this concept that you would say like, I don't really like cooperative games. What is it about
Mhm.
them that doesn't do it for you?
So for me, a lot of the cooperative games that I played, um, they're very puzzly in nature. Like
Hmm.
their essence to me is you as a group are trying to solve a puzzle, the problem of whatever the board is presenting to you. And together you work to solve this puzzle in order to win that objective. However, to me, the problem with solving a puzzle as a group is everyone has different processing speeds. My
Sure.
processing speed is a little bit slower than most of the people that I play with. And I still have the capability of solving the puzzle. However, every time other people would, one, they can process a puzzle out loud. I have to
Hmm.
process it thinking. So I'm already losing my voice in a game which requires people to vocalize their opinions. Um, Two, I don't do well on the spot. So if they even stop and say, "Hey, Fertessa, what do you think?" I'm gonna blank because
Yeah.
that's not how I process things. And so the opportunity is lost, and then they move on. Or I say something that doesn't make sense, and they say, "Oh, but this might be a better plan." And I'm like, "Yeah, that probably is a better plan right now." And they go and do it. So really, I'm letting them move the pieces while I watch, and it's more like watching a video unfold than me participating in
Sure.
undoing and doing this puzzle because of the processing speed. Now, if I play the game with, say, my best friend and we're on the same level, then it's a fun thing for me. Same with like live escape rooms, but if everybody's at different speeds, then I'm really going to be kind of a fly on the wall. And then I really won't feel like I've contributed anything to the puzzle other than standing there and cheering, which it took 2 to 3 hours to do. So
Fair enough. Fair enough.
that is my thing with cooperative games, or the majority that I've played. But I will always play a game that I've never played before, no matter what type it is,
Sure.
because there's always something to learn. But as far as Wicked and Wise, because I was pondering like what is it about cooperation that I would like, and if I could make a cooperative game, what would that be like? It made me think about spades. Because to me, a game where you're partnered with somebody, but you don't know all of the information, you have to trust that partner. To
Hmm.
me, that's cooperation because there's that bond of trust there. And I really love games like spades.
Right.
Um, so I was like, I want to make a partnering game. So you are cooperating with your partner, but you have to depend on them to be able to act on what's in their hand, in order to, bring the team together and work towards this goal. So that was the initial catalyst for Wicked and Wise.
Would it be fair to say that it's taking a step beyond cooperative, which is like this ambiguous level of responsibility on the part of any player,
Hmm.
and that what you're looking for is collaborative games? Like on a team project, assuming that all things are equal, you have to be able to trust that the other person is going to be able to do their role, but they're also here to perform a role. They are a vital piece of that experience. And so it goes beyond just one person dictating what everything's happening and other people are just essentially facilitating this singular vision. And it's more truly collaborative in nature. People are expected, and required to bring their own individual parts to the table.
That's exactly it. Yes. It's like everyone, because you have your own role, you can process it how you want and execute the decision how you want. And you can choose what role it is, what role you're comfortable with as well. So, yes, I absolutely feel like that covers what I like about that.
So when did dragons and mice come into this?
So at first it was by whim because the first convention that I got to playtest this at, wait, first or second convention, it was Metatopia. And I can't remember which came first, BGG Con or Metatopia. But when I playtested at Metatopia, I playtested with Julia Ahern. And she just made an offhand comment. She's like, I just could imagine this being like these dragons with these little mice doing their little counting thing, and that tickled me so much. And I was like, yes. And the mice must be the cutest mice who ever existed, and the dragons must be dragonly. And that just like really stuck with me because, I love the animal theme, and I thought that it would be something that was still very cute, something that I wouldn't mind on the cards, because initially the theme was like this prince with his royal advisor trying to keep the prince in check. So they were working together while the prince was like being the wicked one, spending all the things, and the royal advisor was the wise one doing all the things. But as we got into the gameplay, that became less relevant and not as it didn't feel like it fit for what you were doing in the game. But then we tried with the dragons and the mice and liked it.
I find that successful game development, not that I'm a game developer or a game designer, that's why I'm doing podcasts, is because I like talking to the people who do good at this. But from my experience of talking to many people, successful game development requires that you can let go of maybe core elements that you were initially passionate about. The ability to accept a sacrifice on that key item in order to make it a better game. Were there any particularly hard lessons that you had during the development of Wicked and Wise, or, like iterations that maybe it crushed you a little in order to say, okay, yeah, we need to do this? Or do you feel like that this one at least kind of flowed together really nicely?
I would say there were a lot of challenges with Wicked and Wise, and it wasn't even that it was so hard to let certain things go, but we would kind of have to go all the way back to the start after like developing a cool thing. Like initially, Wicked and Wise had kind of a deck building element to it, where your mouse was, using this deck that they had built based off of the cards that they got. But it got so gamey and complicated that it was just like, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's figure out how we can get this kind of thing where two people are working together, but they're doing two different roles. The asymmetrical nature of the roles, the partnering roles, was so crucial, but it was such a hard thing to balance because you would have this thing where the two roles had different actions and objectives that were so different that they didn't even feel aware of each other. They're like, I'm just trying to do this thing, and coincidentally, my partner's trying to do that thing. And then there were times where we made them overlap so much that it was just like, I barely felt like I was doing anything. Like we were both doing this thing, but like that doesn't make my role unique. So figuring out how to like make both roles feel important while making the team still remain important so that cooperation was there was very hard, as well as like trying to make communication happen, because trick-taking games communication can be tricky, pun intended. And I just that probably took one of the longest bits. So yeah, there were definitely some very interesting places where we kind of not stumbled but got caught up by certain mechanics, and we had to like reassess to get them in order. But I'm very, very happy with how everything came together.
As a relatively new game designer, even though you have already games published and games that are to be published soon, and you are part of a now like full-time game design gig, are there benchmark games that you look at, maybe not from their like financial success, but as far as like their the the peak of creativity, or you know what hits you the most as a creative individual
Mm-hmm.
that you draw inspiration from? Like the best thing that I can relate this to is that you know, I'm a musician. I've written music my entire life, and there are certain songs that I'll listen to and I'll think like, man, if I could write a song like that. Not that I'm ever going to, but like that is such a perfect song in so many regards, and I draw huge inspiration from even the act of trying to, you know, like aspire to make something of that level.
Mm-hmm.
Which of course, you know, is a hard benchmark to put on yourself. But you know, are there games like that? Games that you feel like, ooh, that is what I want to be as a designer. Someone who makes a game like that.
I feel like more than a game that is so unique that it impresses me is the games that I continually want to open and like introduce people to, that
Mm-hmm.
really leave a very strong impression on me, because then I'll go back to what is it about this game that feels just good? Like, what is it that I am coveting about this game? Splendor is one of them, and Stone Age is another. And usually they
Mm.
are so simple, like so very, you know, like this is a great, I don't even know if gateway is the right word, but it is such a just a good clean game that I sit there and analyze, like, how did you arrive at this, and why is it that people fell in love with it? Why did I fall in love with this game? So often the design elegance is something that really, really sticks with me, because the accessibility of a design is like what I really strived to do in my own designs, and I'm not always successful, but that accessibility is so important to get people who don't consider themselves gamers into the gaming hobby. That's how I get, you know, parents and friends to game and say, oh, that's not that bad. Actually, I would do that again. Or to even introduce it to somebody else in their circle, to expand beyond what is considered the hobby. So tapping into what makes something accessible and feel like it is easy to digest while like containing that replayability is like super interesting to me.
Yeah, I completely relate to you on that. I mean, whether it's board games or back to music, I mean, like, I think about the songs that most impress me are the songs that do so much with so little, whether it's like CCR's Who Will Stop the Rain, or it's MF Doom's Figaro, you know, it's, you know, any number of different songs that like feel so Spartan, yet they are so robust. And it's the same thing with games. I mean, I play tons of heavyweight games, and there are loads of heavy duty games that I really love, but the ones that kind of floor me, where I have to like sit back, I'm like, that is a design feat, are games like Splendor, or recently Whitehall Mystery was a game where I was like, this distills the entire genre of hidden movement into its barest parts. It is so easy to learn that I could explain it to non-gamers in a cinch, yet it is the most like high octane version of this genre, and that balance between simplicity and depth, and reward from it is so good. And those are the games that like feel elegant and beautiful, and like that, I can see why, you know, that would be the benchmark to, you know, look at those as something to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't really a question. That's not really a good discussion topic, I guess, on my part. Sometimes I like going into other directions here. But I do want to know, going back to you working at Funko, it's so rare that I get a chance to talk to people who are staffers at a company. So, like, what is your day job? Like, what do you do when you show up to work? Like, how do you fill your time and arrange your time? And how is that different than when you were a freelance game designer?
Yeah. So my actual title is game producer. And that in the description of that, it's kind of like project management where, excuse me, you get a timeline, like say, hey, I want you to design this game about X. This is the budget for it, and this is the age range for it, and also this is kind of the IP that goes with it. Go. So at that point, as a producer, they may assign us like a actual game designer to work on it, as well as like some artists that may be working on the project so that you can get that going and tell us, it's due however many months from now. So, get your milestones in and, get the product moving. And as a game producer, you're trying to make sure that the game hits its different milestones on the timeline, while also developing the gameplay itself. But the cool thing, the cooler thing is, it's a very Prospero Hall / Funko Games is very much a collaborative atmosphere. So it doesn't matter what your title is, you're contributing to the game. And that's why we have just Funko Games on the box rather than individual names, because I don't care if your title is graphic designer or, sales or whatever. Everyone can contribute to game design ideas. Everyone can play test these ideas. And it's because of every single role that these games get made, literally. So, like, even though my title is game producer, I have the opportunity to design games. And in fact, I have designed and produced 7 games at this point. So it's like the opportunity is there to, go beyond what just the role says. And you really get to stretch yourself to these different challenges. And like you get to see so many things, I guess, behind the curtain that as an independent designer, I had no, I guess, thoughts of because I wasn't on the publisher end. But like thinking about, oh, how much this particular component might cost, or thinking about like, oh, if this game is for 5-year-olds, what is their cognitive ability?
Yeah.
If this game's for 3-year-olds, like there has to be an age where you actually learn how to roll a die, right?
Sure,
And
sure.
at a certain age, it's just not feasible because they're just gonna throw it rather than actually like roll it. So that's why we have things like spinners. So like learning these little things, I guess from the consumer end of it, and then also considering it when designing is so very interesting because it's almost like a game design challenge where they tell you, these are your components, this is your deadline, this is your theme, go and see what you can create. But we do that for just all of these games, and it's so fun for me because it's not something that my brain would have reached for on its own. In comparison to what I did as an independent designer, all of those were really just kind of, I don't know if you would even say passion project, but it felt like passion projects where, I had this what if question, I followed it and I followed it all the way through. And, I didn't have to worry about necessarily ages or anything. Even though I personally picked who I wanted my audience to be and who I thought would be playing that game, it's totally different when you're thinking about, the audience who may be buying it that have never played games before or something like that.
Well, you're a creative individual, and the heart of creativity is in the restrictions, the limitations, the parameters that you have to work around, because that's what gives you the interesting challenges to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yes. So that is probably the biggest difference is I'm actually given these nice challenges, and the pickle is trying to figure it out. And I would say as an independent designer, I never imagined I could work on more than one game at once. Like people would say, "Oh, I'm working on 5 different games. I'm gonna put this in the box and test
Right.
this now," and that would horrify me. Um, because, but also I was working a full-time job that had nothing to do with games, and I lost sleep trying to develop just the one game. Also, I like to tunnel vision, so I put my 100% into that game. However, working as a professional game producer is totally different. And actually, I do juggle multiple games because I now have the capacity to do that. So, um, my working style changed because, I had time to actually free up for that. Um, but also, like I guess you don't know what you can do until you actually get the opportunity. So that's great.
Well, I want to end this with something fun. And you are a creative person. You're someone who thrives on challenges, as we've discussed throughout the entirety of this episode. And you work for a company that has access to about a bajillion licenses. But even beyond that, even if licensing weren't a restriction, I want to know, if you could make any game for you with a
Mhm.
particular IP, what would it be?
If I could make a game just for me with any particular IP, I'm not even gonna lie, it would be a BTS game because I love K-pop. I'm just gonna
Love
put
it.
that one out there.
Love it.
And it would be a K-pop game, and it would probably be like the lightest, silliest game, but I would love it and I would play it. So,
I would be there playing it with you. I definitely have my K-pop YouTube playlists going on.
yes,
My
yes,
kid jams to all of that. He loves the haircuts. He's all into
yes.
it. It's our cleaning music, and I think that would be marvelous. Someone contact Fertessa about how to get all the licenses to all the different I guess organizations, because K-pop is such like a unique world of music, but also industry. And so if Funco can secure all that to get it into your hands, then I think you got something cooking. So for Tessa, thanks for coming on to the show. We have on the horizon, Wicked and Wise is coming to Kickstarter August 10th. Do you have any other projects that you want to highlight that you have coming up that people should know
Yes.
about?
Yep. So my third game is Mansplaining, and that one's signed with Breaking Games, and that one will actually be coming to shelves, not Kickstarter. We're looking definitely 2022. I'm thinking spring 2022. We don't have an official date yet, but keep an eye out on my Twitter at Fertessa, and I will always update with that.
That's awesome. We'll have the links to all of that in the description, to the video, to the podcast. And once again, this has been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to see where your career goes from here. Thank you for coming on to the show, Fertessa.
Thank you for having me. See you guys.
If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website, cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.